Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Revere City Council Subcommittee on Public Works. And for those who are present, please rise, salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For those of you who have cell phones, please put them on mute, or silent, or shut them off if you don't want to talk to anybody. Good afternoon. My name is Ira Novoselsky. I'm the chairman, and I'd like to welcome our committee member, Joanne McKenna, from Ward 1. And we have basically two things on the agenda, but 3 items. So first item, we're going to talk about some flooding and issues on Asti Ave near Toscano. And then we're going to talk about Public Works facility and also equipment issues. So the first item on the agenda, Mr. Falzone. Name and address for the record, please.
Rocco Falzone, 55 Toscano Ave, Revere, Mass.
Okay, Mr. Falzone, just so you know, Joanne and I do have our packets that you gave to the clerk, and the other councilors will get them.
Great, good.
You know, whenever the packets go out for this Friday. So once you make your presentation, we only have 20 minutes to deal with this.
Understood.
So,
Understood.
if you can make it shorter, that's fine.
So
We have 2 other items after this, so please say your piece and try and keep to the facts, okay?
I will. I'm going to make it short. I'm going to be direct. The issue, Donnie Goodwin's here, my dear friend for a lot of years, and my issue is that I really wish that Ward 6 people would be here, but obviously they have other commitments, which I'm not too sure what it was. But anyway, I would like to talk to Councilor McKenna. Unbeknownst to me, I had this DEP investigator, Environmental Strike Force, Timothy Dame from Boston. We came down to take a look behind Caruso Court. And unbeknownst to me, when we were driving up Asti Ave, Councilor McKenna, my nightmare became your nightmare, what you're going through. Somebody put a lock on the gate. So the lock on the gate took away my security, my independence to take care of my property, which I've been doing for the past 4 to 5 years. And I'm still waiting to get some information who put the lock on it. So with that said, I'm saying to myself, whomever did put the lock on that gate took it upon themselves that they're responsible for any more damage done to my property. Any more damage done to Toscano and Asti Ave, they took that authority. So at least it gave me a rest to understand what the situation is, more or less. So as far as Mr. Charlie Patch is not here, Councilor Patch is not here, I asked him a question, and he didn't know who put the lock on that gate. But I'll give him a call during the week to find out who did what and what's going on. Councilor McKenna, if I may ask you a question. How do you regulate your area when there is a massive flood going down there? Who do you call to get your key to open up that gate, if you don't mind me asking?
So it's controlled by DCR in Donnie Goodwin. So that's basically, I would call Donnie and say, Donnie, I think that we need to close the gate. And so Donnie calls DCR, and DCR gets, both of them in coordination, they close the gate. But I mean, they make the decision. I just feel that if when neighbors call me and say, we need to close the gate because there are, the waves are coming over, it's basically up to those two to close the gate. They talk together and decide. So
Okay.
I just make the recommendation, but it's up to them to take care of that gate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My point of interest is what happens in the weekend? What do you do when we have an area coming down and there's this big storm coming in? I'm sure no one's going to be working the weekend. What happens then?
Every time I've called Donnie Goodwin, he's answered his phone. So, you know, Paul Agenzio, or if I have to get in touch with anybody, they're really pretty good. So
Okay.
that's, I haven't had any problems at all. You know, whenever I call, they answer the phone.
Great.
And Chief
That's good.
Guido too, so.
If I can go on a reflection here, when I was first coming up here about maybe 2 months ago, I had mentioned to Councilor Patch about name recognition. It means an awful lot. I've been calling this fellow from, where are we? Mr. Peter Coletti, stormwater engineer out of Boston. Never returned my phone call. And I ran it by Mr. Councilor Patch. Councilor Patch made a phone call. Not even 20 minutes later, Charlie Patch called me back and he said, I got the answer for you. He said, I forget what he said, but basically my issue is that name recognition means an awful lot. And the response that you get from the DPW is amazing, because name recognition, with yourself, you're a counselor and you're going to get service right from the top. For almost 18 years, me making phone calls for 18 years, and nobody responds to the problem down there. Now, let me explain why. They know it's a no-win situation, and it's not going to be fixed. My issue is the fact where I've mentioned to Mr. Goodwin numerous times. We talked about it. He took me on a tour, and I thanked him for that. Some of the pictures that are in my packet, if it wasn't for this gentleman right here, I couldn't present my problem, so I want to thank him for that. On the other hand, what I don't understand, there's been no communication between the DPW and what I call the Board of Health. If there was a lot more communication between the DPW and Inspection Services, I would not be here today, because there's no preventive maintenance. In the pictures in that area, in that book that I just presented, it tells 1,000 stories. Everything is right there. If Inspection Services took the bull by the horns and find the people from Caruso Court, I would not be here today. The place would never flood. There's no preventive maintenance. Again, there's no communication, as far as I can see it. And I do understand that, you know. I'm just a taxpayer in the city of Revere, paying my taxes and going right along. But after 28 years, I said to myself, something has to be done. And the reason why I'm bringing this up to the forefront today is because I've got a real serious health problem, and I can't do what I've been doing for the past 4 years. And the pictures are in there. I'm in there with my rake, making sure it's clean so we don't flood again. And Charlie Patch thought it was fixed, and I ran it by Charlie. There wasn't flooding because I've been down there taking care of the problem. I'm not going to rehash old stories. So past, the present, and the future. The past is the past. I'm presenting it again, and I'm looking forward for the future to really come into play here. But I do understand, this situation is too big for Revere itself. I have to go out of Revere and go get a state delegation to talk to them about my situation down here. So with your help, with the packet I put together, maybe we can keep this in committee and discuss a few more things that Mr. Goodwin can help me out, and all you councilmen will do the same thing for me. So with that said, before I do go, I would like to keep this in committee. And if I may ask, can I suspend the rules for the next committee that we have? I would like to ask if you guys can get a hold of Mr. Coletti, the stormwater engineer from Boston. And there's also, I spoke to an Army Corps of Engineers fella. His name is Christopher Hatfield. And I spoke to him. And he's willing to come down if you got a hold of him. The fellow from Boston, Timothy Dane, come down, and again, he wanted to get behind Caruso Court, but there was a lock behind Caruso Court. Couldn't get in there. I took those pictures before the lock went on there, just in case something like this might happen. So there's two ways I can look at this. Nobody's trying to hide anything, it's all in the open. But like I said, if there was more communication between Inspection Services and DPW, I would not be here today. So with that said, I give up. So if you'd like to
Well,
make, you know,
if I
call
may,
these people?
Mr. Falzone, well, we don't want you to give up, you know, we want
Thank
you to. You know, but, you know, there's a limit on what we can do,
I
okay?
understand.
We can talk all we want, but I just have a question for you.
Sure.
You talked about locks, okay? You said they put a lock on the gate
Yes.
behind your house?
Yes.
And then you talked to.
No, I'm sorry, not behind my house. This gate is on the trash gates on SD Ave, so nobody can get in
Okay.
except the responsible people.
And the gates that you were talking to Council McKenna about? Floodgates, so they're separate issues, they're two separate things.
Oh, okay.
Because when we have a key, you know, they have a pump station there, with
Sure.
Council McKenna.
Okay.
And even my area used to get flooded if that pump was not on. So, you know, so she and I, you know, run it, you know, work on it together to keep an eye on things. So if, you know, the area down behind the Garfield School gets flooded, we need that pump station opened and turned on. So
Understood.
there's gates on that pump station that
Understood.
close, and they pump the water over Bennington Street, okay? The trash rack is a different situation. There is a trash rack there, which I think you go down periodically, you never do. So that's DCR, okay? That's a DCR issue. In your case, your issue is a Mass DOT issue, not a city issue. So if somebody put a lock on it, it may have been Mass DOT that put it on, because technically, you're trespassing.
Absolutely,
When
no
you go on
question
that,
about
when
it.
you go on that property. So
Absolutely.
if you get hurt doing that, you know, there's going to be trouble in River City, you know,
Absolutely.
basically. And
I
we don't
can
want
see it.
that to happen. And I think whoever put that lock on it, whether it was this gentleman from MassDOT, Peter Collette, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to be careful on who goes on the property, and it should be locked.
Mm-hmm.
And what you have to do is probably go through a state delegation, through Representative
Rosalie Vincent.
Rosalie Vincent,
Yeah.
to get to MassDOT to go in and clean that periodically.
Okay.
Now, as far as fining, you know, we're working on DPW and inspectional services, again, it's apples and oranges. You know, it's not city property, so DPW wouldn't have anything to do with ISD in this case. But we don't have pictures of someone actually doing it, that documentation. It's nice, these pictures are good to see what the results are, but you can't find just anybody in Caruso Court, just for the sake, because you think that they put it in, or if you saw them doing it, pictures.
Oh,
They need
point
pictures
taken.
of the
Okay.
people actually doing it. Then they can get fined, maybe by the city, depending on where they went. If they went back beyond the gate, then it's Mass Highway. If it was before the gate and they get pictures of it, then the city could potentially have an idea of who it is. So, you know, it's a legal issue in some cases, so we have to be careful on how we take our steps,
Understood.
okay? So,
So,
you know, I believe that some of the, you know, these agencies were contacted for tonight, and we never heard from them. So, you know, we can't make them come.
okay, oh, I understand that.
You know, if Councilor Patch wanted to put a motion in at one of his meetings to have the state delegation chase this down, it would be better if it did come from him,
Okay,
because he's the ward councilor, and then the city council would approve it, and then see what MassDOT does at that point with copies going to our state delegation.
okay,
and
so
see
that
what
would
they
be
do.
the Charlie Patch, Daniel Rizzo, Jessica Genino?
It could be a councilor at large, or it could be a ward councilors,
All right.
you know, ward councilor.
I do understand fully what you just had said. There's no question in my mind that my situation was a liability, taking the bull by the horns by mine. I do understand that. But it's twofold here. So let's say, for instance, the DPW goes in that gate there and they fall, they break their arm, they break their leg. Wouldn't that be the same? Who are they going to go for?
No.
Who was going to get a hold of them? Who did they sue?
Well, they wouldn't sue.
That's a workman's compensation
Yeah.
case. They're working in the action of carrying out their duties and responsibilities. They fall, they are covered under the Workman's Compensation Act and whatever that entails. but a private citizen.
But hopefully, the superintendent wouldn't send DPW workers on state property to
Well,
do the work.
the
unless there was
problem is, we
a
do
super
that,
emergency.
especially in that area, even though it's not within our right-of-way. But if we don't, you would have continuous problems in that Asti Ave area. Anytime we get prolonged rain, we do have guys driving around, not just there, but throughout the city, checking on these things. Rocco is very and he if you've been through what he's been through over the last 30, 40 years, you would understand, how he feels. I mean, we've done a lot of infrastructure upgrades and stuff, but it seems that if that trash rack is not clean, then you can just have street flooding. And obviously where Rocco is, he's right in the bowl of it. He's at the lowest point. So any water that collects there. And prior to that, we had issues on Sicilian Ave, Toscano Ave, Asti Ave, and the whole drainage system. Now, we've added a 15-inch drain to Toscano. We fixed the 36-inch line on Asti Avenue. We fixed the 30-inch line on Sicilian Avenue. We put a new pump station at Johnny Road. We got a new pump station on Sargent and Ritchie Street. We petitioned the state to fix those gates at out on Route 1 years ago, and actually it was DOT who actually stepped up to the plate and bonded it and paid for it, but it's not within their jurisdiction. It's within the jurisdiction of DCR because they control the town line brook. The culvert that Rocco is speaking of is within the right-of-way of the Mass Highway, and it's an issue with them. They're aware of it. They have keys. We have keys now. And it's not just an issue of keeping Rocco out. I'm sure he feels that way because he really is intently pays attention to everything that goes on there, especially when it's raining. There's never a storm that we don't go out there, that he's not out there, talking to us what's going on, trying to, see what the, just how bad the storm will be and what he can expect for flooding in his house or around his property. So that's really not the issue. The other issue is that, they don't want it open because, in the event that nobody's there, kids can get in there. It gives you direct access to the highway, and those are the things that they're looking about. But Asti Avenue and the back of that culvert there at Caruso, it's a problem. We go up there, and we have limited staff that we probably go up there and clean that out. I would say anywhere from 3 to 4 times a year. We send a Bobcat up there, but every time somebody cuts their grass or does their leaves, it just goes right over the back and into the culvert. We've modified the gate to try to get it so that initially it would catch everything. And it's not like big tree branches and things that really cause your problem. Your problem is when the grass is in it, it builds up like a mat. And it almost comes like a stop log after a while, because then what comes behind it? Guy throws a pool liner in there, the guy throws a garbage bag in there, it's just unbelievable what goes on there. So when we're not there as often as we used to be because of the upgrades. We kind of know what our situational problems are. But when they didn't have the line at Toscano, when they didn't have the repair at Asti, and they didn't have the repair at Sicilian, that was all surcharging and coming down Asti, and it would collect right in front of his house. So now we know that, those lines are clear and free. We got a pump station. It's better. But the biggest problem is the hydraulic grade line in the town line brook. That head wall, and you will see in Rocco's pictures, where the trash rack is in the outgoing side, the downstream side, it needs to be cleared. A couple of years ago, I went there with our machinery. We cleaned it out. We threw it right up on it, and they called up yelling and screaming. That's not my job to do that. But the people in Ward 6 are being affected by that. That, at least that trash rack and around that Route 1 gate system that's over there is, and the other thing is, they said years ago, they didn't have any flooding there. And that's true in this regard. The type of gate that they had problems in 1996, Rocco?
1996 is
Yeah,
when the first...
and that was before I was on the council with it, but I remember going down there and seeing the devastation from the flooding and everything. The tie gates had failed, and they had failed tremendously. And the whole area, right up to Milano, the whole area, Sicilian, the whole area was just underwater because the tide comes up. When they replaced it, DEP gets involved, and they considered that town line brook marine biology, it's a wetland. And so what you need to do is you need to introduce all this water, salt water up in there, and it takes up the capacity of the culvert. So depending on when the rain hits or how hard it's raining, it's really not affected all that much by the rain if there's no restriction on the tide gates. But when those gates are closed, it's a problem, because it can back up. But the one thing I will say is that during the last storms that we had, where the entire city was underwater, they didn't get a drop because the tide gates work. Now, those tide gates can fail, and when they do, you get a log in there or something goes in there, or when they had the initial setting, how much water they wanted to bring up into the, and this was needed by the DEP, and what happened was, when we set it at the elevation that they wanted to, on a dry day, if the tide was at a higher level, it would be coming out of the catch basins. The tide would, so we, that's all been rectified, but the storage capacity in that culvert is probably maybe at 35–40%. And then when you add water, seawater, to that capacity during a storm event, you're depending strictly on that hydraulic grade line, the pressure from the upstream side to be able to push those gates open on the downstream side. So until we get something done in that town line brook, the potential for flooding will always
Okay.
exist.
Councilman Kenna?
I just have a couple of solutions, maybe. So first of all, it's very disturbing to hear that there are residents down there dumping stuff over a fence.
Yes, they are.
Is there any way that we could put a camera down there?
If I may,
Yes?
I was talking to DEP, and the only way that we can, again, put cameras on the fence, so when they catch them, like Councilor Ira said, that would be tremendous. He did say he was going to contact somebody down here to get behind Caruso Court, but I don't think the initial phone call was made yet. But I will call him to remind him again that.
Well, I mean, Charlie Patch is your Ward 6 councilor. He can definitely put a motion in to see if he could put, if we could put cameras down there to.
Oh, that would be great.
And the other thing is that, have we notified these people that, that dumping is not allowed and they'll be heavily fined? We have notified them?
So
It gets back to what Ira says, it wasn't me, it was my neighbor. It wasn't me, it was the other guy.
The only thing I would say is, are there any telephone poles around in that area?
That still falls within the Mass DOT right-of-way, Ira, because it's on the backside of the fence. The backside of that property actually belongs to DOT. And so we do have cameras. I know that we had bought, like we used on Kimball Avenue. Those cameras are available. So,
Right.
they can be put up as long as we can get permission to.
Well, is there a city pole around there we can use?
Well, you don't need a city pole. You can hang that on a tree limb or,
Yeah,
the
well,
backside of the fence pole.
I don't
But
want
you-
it too low where someone's going to steal it either.
Well, we put them down in other areas that they're kind of low, because sometimes we're looking for license plates and things like that. So what we really should do is invest in some of our own things, like the hunters do. They go out there and it's got a battery. I'm serious. You go out there and
I agree.
they blend right in with the greenery and stuff like that. You buy them. I mean, I have one at my house, and I use it to do the deer out in my backyard and things like that. But there are avenues we can do, but we still need the permission and from the DOT to actually go in there, because they don't. They do no, as Rocco said, the DOT does no maintenance in that area, none. I mean, in all the years that I've been there, they're up above, doing all their maintenance, but when anything gets over the fence, if it blows down into the culvert, now it gets stuck in the trash rack. Newspapers, plastic bags, cups, and.
Ira.
Whose responsibility is that, to clean that out?
Well, it's actually it's in the DOT right away, but we've been cleaning it ever since I've been here, and
that's not right.
and I don't have the manpower to send somebody down there every week to make sure that, somebody hasn't thrown things. Sometimes we go over there, we find very little. Sometimes we go over there with, you can take a dump truck load of stuff out of there, so it's not, it's not minor in nature, depending on what time of year it is. And the biggest problem is in the fall, when everybody's doing their last cutting, the leaves are coming down, and you get those heavy October rains, it becomes exponentially worse because of the amount of rain
Okay.
and the tides that come in and hold
So
it.
what, I'll let you go in a second. I'm going to wind this down, but Rocco, I think you ought to get to Counselor Patch and ask him to put those motions in,
Thank you.
okay? And even ask him to include a camera, that, I think the police department has them.
Yeah, we actually
Yeah.
bought them for them.
Okay,
Yeah, on a grant.
so, and ask them to put them up, they're wireless items, so they transmit back to a computer. So if we can find a spot where we can keep an eye on the area and be able to identify people dumping, then that may solve part of the problem.
Yep, there's one thing I'd like to just touch on what my dear friend here said. This is, every time the carnival comes in and Showcase Cinemas, it's the rainy season. Every time they come in here, it's rainy. We're in the rainy season now. The winter months, from October on, we have really no problems down here. The only problems that when those trash gates get bogged down is from the saltwater grass phragmites that grow 6 to 7 feet tall. And when the season changed, they wash down into the trash gates. Another point is the fact where wood floats. This time of year, when they cut their tree limbs, is when they cut their grass and they throw it over the fence.
Okay, Rocco, we understand that.
Okay.
Okay, why don't we, Councilman Kenny has one thing, and then I want to close this down and move on.
Thank you.
Oh, I just want to know, if there's dumping signs also down there? No
We
dumping?
put them on the roads, we don't really have access to the back. There would be no need to put them in the back because they just throw it over their fence anyway.
Okay, well, I would
exactly.
suggest, I really, Rocco, I would,
What happens is, Joanne, here's the home.
yeah,
Here's the Mass Highway right away, and there's a fence, they just throw everything over the top. And, obviously, you can tell, you go down there on, every other week is yard waste, you never see it out there.
No.
So what you end up is, where it's coming from.
Well,
But you
right.
just can't pinpoint it on one particular individual.
well, I would make a suggestion that you,
I would
like
love to-
Ira said,
I would love to
you
hear
get your ward councilor to put some cameras down there. And then, you can put them high enough, maybe you can put them high enough and then notify the people and just say, we're watching you, no dumping, and you'll get fined. At least, you'll give them a heads up and maybe they won't do it. But I'm very disturbed that they're doing that, so.
Thank you for listening. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it again.
Thank you, Mr. Falzone. Appreciate your time, and we will keep this in committee, and we'll talk later.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Donnie.
Good to see you. All right, Al.
I'll see you soon.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, Mr. Superintendent, the next two things we want to talk about is, number one, the DPW facility
Yeah.
and the equipment that we're buying for you, what we've bought for you, what you're still looking for.
Yeah.
So if you got the floor, and if Council McKenna has any questions afterwards, we'll do it.
I mean, obviously, the equipment that we brought was a marked improvement on the snow removal and plowing capabilities this winter. I think the biggest thing is that, every truck now that we buy, except for probably the crane truck and a chipping box that we have of leaves, has got a plow on it. So now, when you're out there, you generally see at least one Revere truck doing the plowing, maintaining, overseeing what's going on. And I think this year, in combination with getting the cars off the street this year, it was much better. And I think I got to commend Chief Guido and Officer Rose and the rest of the Revere Police staff. They did an excellent job this year in getting cars, especially out of your area and all the emergency arteries throughout the city.
And, and may I say that, seeing yourself plow a street is impressive, because before, whenever we saw a Revere DPW truck behind a Congo line, it didn't have a plow on it, and was just watching the other guys, the private
Right.
guys do their thing, but at least now they're plowing with them. And we have 3 vehicles plowing instead of only 2
Correct.
in a group.
Correct.
So
And it's really
that-
made
that
for,
wa- that
it
was
makes it much
impressive.
more efficient and, obviously, we get to be able to push back a lot further so the storm doesn't get too far ahead of us.
Exactly.
The only problem we do have in some areas is still the parking. Parking is an issue when we get streets blocked. It becomes a nuisance for us. So I think now that we're on the subject, I think let's not lose sight of it again. And, you know, maybe at the next subcommittee meeting, we come up with some ideas of, you know, what roads we want to make one-way, which roads do we have no parking during snow emergencies. You know, I hear from, you know, some people, oh, you know, it's an inconvenience for the people. Well, you know, Winthrop, you can't park in the street. Lynn, you can't park in the street. So where do they park? They park in Revere because they know they can. And you'd be surprised how many cars that sit in the Beachmont area that are from Winthrop, and they sit there for weeks because there's a parking ban all winter in Winthrop.
Or the East Boston people
Yeah.
parking on Bennington Street where
Correct.
they can. I know when
Exactly,
Bennington Street
right.
is state road,
You
so
know.
they have to get off.
So-
But they come into Joanne's
Yeah.
neighborhood to park.
Joanne's
I know that.
impacted in that regard more than any other area.
Yep, absolutely. She's adjacent to another city
Right.
that says,
You
get
know,
out
I
of
mean,
our town.
I've seen people pull up, you know, sitting there, and all of a sudden, you know, an Uber shows up, and away they go. So who takes an Uber home from the parking space in front of their
Right,
house?
right.
So you know
But,
what's going on.
You know, I keep working on, you know, emergency arteries, and we're working on, hopefully, North Shore Road, the old North Shore Road from the Parkway down to Kimball Ave.
I have talked to the people that be at Mass DOT. Mass DOT considers North Shore Road a no parking zone 24/7, 365.
Right.
They just accommodate the residents on North Shore Road. So I don't think that North Shore Road will be any problem. All we got to do is enforce the law. And so if we just put up as an emergency artery and post the
Post it.
signs, we'll be fine.
Right,
But-
and they plow it for us, so it's not that we plow it, it's just, and they look for this, they want this to
They
happen.
do. And the thing that I really would like to get on is because of the gate closure that happens periodically during big storms in Ms. McKenna's area, is that those streets are two ways. So you got people from Winthrop trying to get around the gate. They're traveling through the neighborhoods, they're getting stuck, they're going down dead-end streets, they don't even know where they're going.
Right.
They think they can travel across the marsh to get over to Winthrop. It's true. And so what happens, they get up, they get stuck, you got a car coming this way, a car coming that way, you got the plows coming,
Forget about it.
you can't even get by.
Disaster.
So a road that if you made it a one-way would take maybe, you know, from one end of, say, Endicott Ave to the other, if you're plowing, it would take you probably 3 minutes. But because of all this crap with the traffic and the cars coming and going, it takes you sometimes as much as, you know, 35 minutes to an hour, depending
looking
on
for a
who's stuck
one-way-
and
you're
who's
looking
what.
for a one-way
And
there.
that's how you lose the entire neighborhood. So, you know, those are the streets like Endicott, Bellingham, Bradstreet Ave, you know, Crescent Ave. There's things that we can do to make the traffic flow. And we need to, and for the most part, it's not the residents from Beachmont, it's residents that are trying to get in and out of Winthrop.
Councilor McKenna.
I just have to commend you because I was on the plow with Jimmy Mercurio, and I saw firsthand what goes on in around Beachmont. And I have to commend you for being on the plow and dealing with, that was a nightmare. And so I've just put up dead-end signs because people were trying to get across the marsh on Crystal Ave
Yeah.
and Belle Isle Ave, and it was crazy. But even Winthrop Ave is a one-way. People were going the wrong way because they couldn't get out of there. There is a conversation coming up where I am going to address Bradstreet Ave, Crest Ave,
Yep,
Endicott.
Bellingham's
and,
already a one-way.
Bellingham, but Bellingham has its
parking
issues
restriction
too.
on one side,
It does,
they do,
it's crazy.
yeah.
And Crest Ave too, one part of it's one way and the other part of it's another way. So we have to come up with a solution, plus we have to come up with some sort of an emergency, only park on one side or no parking. But that is a conversation for, we're first dealing with Suffolk Downs, HYM, and then we'll have that conversation with the neighbors. And definitely you'll get involved, and Chief Guida will get involved. But I think it needs to happen because it was a nightmare. You couldn't even get up Bradstreet Ave because the cars were going up there and they were getting stuck, and the plows weren't going there, and the apparatus, that we had a gas leak, And the fire engines couldn't even get down Pearl Ave because people were stuck everywhere. So it was a nightmare. And it can't happen again because, God forbid, if there's a tragedy. So we'll work on it, definitely.
I think a little, part of a savior is the Wonderland Garage, being open for
Yeah,
folks.
And, timing is an issue with those things because during the day, it's still open to the commuters and it's generally after 5 o'clock. So, everybody's, well, there's no place to park, there's no place to park. Well, I don't believe that Revere is any less dense than either Winthrop or Lynn. And so, especially Lynn, Medford, communities like that, they have, in Medford, they have a system where they alternate every other year that there's no parking on one side of the street unless it's always been designated no parking on this side, then it's always that way. But if you live in Medford on an odd year, the odd side, there's no parking. On an even year, there's, so these are the things that you can put in that actually work.
Well, that's up to you as the traffic commissioner.
Well, yes, but at the same time, every council is different, council, you know that. We've been friends for a very long time, and you get opposition to that. And you see some of these streets that we're dealing with, it changes direction, it changes side. Every other 6 months, Ashley will attest with certain streets, they're up here every 6 months. Put it this way, put it that way, come back, put it this way, come back, put it that way. And, they kind of put the, they make a lot of work for Ashley, they make a lot of work for me, and the councils are kind of put in the middle by the people. And so, you just need to take a stand, put it in, and that's just the way it is.
Got to bite the bullet.
You have to. It's,
Yeah, I understand.
You want to make everybody happy and accommodate everybody, but people are creatures of habit, and I think once something goes into play, and it's in play long enough, people just get accustomed to doing things that way, and it all works out in the long run. I think public safety is the key here, not offending somebody.
Absolutely.
And can I just say that we just had a fire on Bellingham Ave. And if it was in the wintertime, and it was during a storm like that, that whole block would have went up. Because there was no way those apparatuses would be able to get up that hill because people were just blocking the hill. They were stuck there. So, and they couldn't allow the plows to do their job.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about your new facility, what we're talking about. I know we mentioned $22 million. It's in Ways and Means, but, talk about that a few minutes, and then for a few minutes, talk about your, where you're going to store the equipment temporarily and about the new trailers coming in, et cetera.
The trailers are on their way in. They were supposed to be in within a month, but we just got something. I have the drawings. They're behind schedule a little bit, just about how much, because they are being built to order, and they should be here very shortly. The contract has been signed. The funding has been made available by the council, and so that issue has been resolved. The other issues about what we do with some of the equipment that needs to be stored inside is going to have to be dealt with. We're looking for some areas, maybe some rental properties around the city that we might be able to rent a garage that we can put something in but for the most part, we can go a cheaper route with most of the equipment, put cold storage, and put the stuff outside. But most of the equipment for water and sewer, you have specialty trucks. You've got a camera truck, you've got a Vector truck, you've got a jet truck, you've got their backhoe, and those things have to be they have to be inside. So we need to find something that we can accommodate. That the other trucks can stay outside, we can get them going. I had a fleet of oil trucks and never stored them inside. There's, you can put electric heaters on them to keep them going. So there's things you can do with them that we can do. But that's a work in progress at this point, and we'll probably need to come back to the council to discuss, what locations are available and if there would be any additional cost for a temporary move while they take it.
Have you reached
That'll all
out-
be predicated on, what type of program that the council chooses to move forward with. There's one in here that I don't really care for that will take longer time, would give us, that inside storage, but it's going to reduce the size of the facility. And I think people need to understand that the feasibility study, based on what the city's Public Works is required to do, is right around, 57,000 square feet. And that came up 10,000 feet short based on the size of our location. And then if you go to the three-phase things, it gets even smaller. So right now, we're in a situation where we're operational obsolescence, I call it, because, the garage is not big enough, you can't store in the equipment. And if you're gonna make this program work, you really need to get the best deal for the best. And I think the first program
the
is.
feeling I've gotten from councilors is that we want to go get it done as quickly as possible.
And that would be the first phase, because even some of these, these second phases and third phases that they talk about could actually cost more depending on, because if the economy heats up, and it seems that it is, especially in construction and infrastructure, that your escalation costs for labor and construction materials,
Right.
who knows what's going on with this little trade thing that's going on, but amongst it, that has a very negative impact on the cost of construction. So these things need to be taken into consideration. And
So, Donnie, I don't know if you've reached out to HYM to store some of your equipment in there, but I know Redgate is storing their equipment in the parking lot, and I think the facility that used to house the racetrack has a facility to house
Yeah.
inside.
HYM has been very gracious to us in leaving our snow yard. When we do snow removal, they don't charge us to put snow down there, so they've been very gracious. But for the amount of time that we need this storage, it's going to conflict with their development project, so I don't think that's going to work. I mean, I don't know what the plans for Wonderland is. I know there's some storage behind Northgate Shopping Center that may be available. There's a garage there. We're going to try to make some kind of agreement with the property owners over there. And, but, we're going to be limited to what we can use there because there's an area there that's a snow yard in the winter. So that will be off limits to us. We won't be able to. So we're very limited as to what we can do and where we can go. So, that needs to be ironed out before this construction. So based on whatever phase you guys are going to determine is in the best interest, and I think it's the first one, obviously. I mean, so that'll determine, when we start the move. Because it's not just equipment, it's, the water sewer and parks, we got lawnmowers, weed whackers, and sign shop. The sign shop, we could probably use one of the rooms at the McKinley School to operate out of for a couple of years. We may be able to get some containers for the stuff that we can put in for, water and sewer in the parks, but we still need a location that we can put them at. And we're gonna need security, and we're gonna need to put in electrical services so we can plug the trucks in so that they'll start in the wintertime.
I'm sorry. Forgive me, Rick.
Right?
I think that's, you filled us in pretty well of what what was on our agenda for tonight. I know everything's an ongoing thing, and I think we needed to hear a lot of this stuff. And I think that Council McKenna, in my area, are probably the toughest areas in the city. Maybe North Revere is probably another.
It's difficult up there.
Difficult neighborhood, but.
But it's less congested as well.
Right, and I just want people to know that, we're working on things. We're not just sitting back and watching the world go by.
Well,
And it's a lot of activity and a lot to soak up.
I'll tell you, I appreciate what this administration, what this council has done for us. We've come a long way in the last 2 years as it relates to manpower and, feasibility study that's resulting in the building of a new facility and bringing us to where we need to be. I mean, the Department of Homeland Security is now deemed that Public Works departments are first responders, and, you know, we're probably one of the first ones to get there and the last ones to leave. So, you know, times have changed. We haven't kept up with the times, and not only with equipment, but manpower, and the building is just, you know, I wrote up a whole big thing here to go through, but I'm going to withhold it. You know, of the many, I got 2-3 pages of many reasons why this, and, you know, the biggest one is for the health and safety of the men that work there. I mean, it's, you know, I think everybody knows. I think, you know, the mayor came down, saw it, and he took action right away to remedy the problem. That building is a disgrace. And it's a health issue to the men, and it's a safety issue. Water coming through, slip and falls. We have one of our best guys, Matthew Martelli, that we all know, and fell and broke his neck on a slippery floor because the rain was coming in through the, you know, and, you know, there's been other workman's comp cases related to the condition of the building. And, you know, I've had to move my office staff out of there and bring them up here because it's unhealthy, and, you know, so I think we're heading in the right direction, and, you know, we're all happy about what we see for the future, and we'll be able to service the
Right.
people better. I mean,
It's a similar situation to what we had with the police department.
Correct.
How long
Correct.
we went with the old
Correct.
station before we could take, you know, appropriate the money to build a new station. And we're in the same position there.
the building is non-insurable, that's how bad it is. And
I'm
the
not
police-
surprised.
And the police station never got that bad,
Yeah,
that it was
I'm not
insurable.
surprised.
So-
But, and listen, you know that the council is always taking care of the public works, as we have with fire and police. And now we're working on a new fire station down the Pines, which we know is needed. So, you know, I know I appreciate all the efforts that you and your guys put into this. And, you know, the same with, Chief Bright and Chief Guido. You know, they are our first responders.
It's a team.
And I've always
it's a
said that
team
for
effort,
years.
Ira, and, you know, working with the police and fire as we have over the years, you know, I can't say enough about them. They're always there for us.
Right.
We're always there for them. But at this point, it's getting to the point that that building is uninhabitable for human beings.
Consumption.
It's just, you know, nothing is up to code. Everything is, you know, from air handlers to carbon monoxide to plumbing, the floor is sinking, the roof has got holes in it the size of basketballs. Every computer has to be covered up with tops every night for the fear it's gonna rain the night before. It's well beyond its, and it needs to be torn down completely. We don't need a phased-in project. We need to get something there
Right.
as soon as possible. If not for anything else, but for the health and well-being of the employees that work.
And we want those folks to know that we do support them. I know some of them don't, but, you know, I know it's
Listen.
frustration. I know it's frustration, but, you know, sometimes they have to, you know, take us into consideration
there's-
that
there's certain-
we're not the bad guys here.
I would say the vast majority of the men down there really are very excited about what they see and what's coming down the line. There are others that, you know, and a few, not many, that don't see the process that's required to make this happen. You know, somebody has to make the decision that we need to move forward, and that was done by this mayor, and we have moved forward. And from day one, he got in and said, I'm gonna do this for you guys, I'm gonna do that for you guys, I'm gonna do this. He's very interested in the DPW and what it can do to service the people in this community. And it's a high priority for him, and he's shown it. He's hired men, he's bought equipment, he's buying a building, he's given them a new contract. So he has taken this very seriously, and I know myself, I appreciate it immensely, and I know the men that work in the building appreciate it as well.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks,
Councilor
guys.
McKenna, for attending. Our friends in the press, thank you for coming down. Our city clerk, thank you for your assistance, and thank you to Revere TV for their time and efforts. Thanks, Rick. Good night, folks.